Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the GoBeercats podcast, part of the Catskeller Social Club. I am your host, Brandon, and as you can see here right from the jump, we have a very special guest with us today, Scott Marshall. He is our official dignitary, the voice of a whole fan base. He didn't even know what he was getting into today. He is from the Pistols Firing blog, and I believe there's a podcast involved there as well. Marshall, welcome into the GoBeercats podcast.
Thank you for having me. This sounds like a lot of fun.
I appreciate that. We got a lot to talk about today. I want to get your thoughts on some bigger picture Big 12 items and what I mean. There's only like what could we possibly talk about in the broad scheme of the Big 12. But then I want to hear some about some Stillwater traditions. If Bearcats fans are going there for the first time to experience whether it's basketball, football, softball, whatever. I want to give Bearcats fans a heads up and sort of a getting to know you type of episode for the Oklahoma State Cowboys.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Hopefully, I do Stillwater proud. Hopefully, I don't have any takes that are too controversial. Yeah,
that's all right. We'll take them. Before we get into some of those controversial takes, Marshall, we do a thing here for the GoBeercats podcast. I like to do it before we get too far into things. It's time for a beer. This one, if I can find the camera, turn it around. There you go, Brandon. This is the Summer Ale from Westside Brewing, the closest brewery to me right now. And luckily for me, I'd put them in my top 5 breweries in Cincinnati. We've got a very thriving craft beer scene here in Cincinnati. So something light, crisp, and full of sunshine to get us started. That is brought to you by our new sponsor, or our new-ish sponsor, the Delhi Liquor Store. They have you covered not only with a great beer selection with new beer drops almost every day, but everything you need for a great party or tailgate, wine, liquor, cigars, or if you just need a beer on the way home, they have you covered in any way, shape, and form. I think, Marshall, that's a good segue. If you could sort of tell us, have you ever had the 1890 original?
I have not, if I'm honest.
Okay.
So there are 2 breweries in Stillwater. There's Iron Monk, which does the 1890, and then there's a place called Stone Cloud here in town as well. I've until recently been gluten free. So me and beer don't always mix, but I'm starting to kind of microdose myself back into the gluten lifestyle. So maybe I'll get around to it here in the next few months.
Okay, so I asked that because our NIL collective just recently announced a beer that they're partnering with one of the biggest brewery in Cincinnati to get that done, and people are super excited. We've been clamoring for a UC Bearcats beer for a while now, and this is as close as we're going to get with Cincy Light. So if any school that's had a beer or a partner with a brewery, I'm always anxious to see what that came up with. I think 1890's been around for a little while as well. So
yeah, most of the school year at least, but everybody that I've heard that has had it has spoke rave reviews of it. But that might just be because Pistol Pete's on the can for all I know.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll take it for sure. So we from there, if people are coming into Stillwater for a game, no matter the season, off the bat here, can you give us a brewery, restaurant, bar recommendations that people should seek out?
Yeah, so restaurant-wise, our big things, we have a place called Eskimo Joe's. It's traditional American food. There's a bar in there as well. You got to get sweet pepper bacon cheese fries. That's kind of their main thing. Then there's also Hideaway Pizza. The original Hideaway Pizzas here in town. It's just good pizza. I don't know much around that, but those are the 2 main food staples in Stillwater. And then I mentioned the breweries. There's Iron Monk and there's Stone Cloud. Stone Cloud's pretty new. I think it was in Oklahoma City, and then they've opened one up here in Stillwater within the last year or 2.
Very nice. I should have went back and listened to that again because we had Brett McMurphy on a couple weeks ago, and he gave us some recommendations. He's still proclaiming that he's a Big 12 guy, right? He said some people think that he hates the Big 12, but he's an Oklahoma State grad, right? He's an alum. So he was giving us some recommendations there real quick. I should have went back and listened to them to see if they matched up to what you recommended, but I unfortunately didn't have time to do that. So that's good to know. That's people I know UC fans travel better than what they get credit for. So I'm sure people will be super excited for any recommendations. The next sort of bigger Big 12 question for you. It's a light one, not real heavy, not too thought provoking here, but give me your thoughts so far on Brett Yormark.
I think so far so good. I think some of his ideas have been maybe a little out of the blue, maybe a little like, what the heck does that even mean? Like, I'm not sure that many teams are going to want to give a home game up to go to Mexico. Mm-hmm. Ideas like that are a little maybe off the wall. But I think it's in terms of coming in, helping stabilize things, obviously jumping the Pac-12, getting the TV deal done. I think a lot of that outside the box thinking has really helped him. So I think so far so good. And I guess we'll see in the coming months. It could be days as far as, the kind of Pac-12, Big 12 rivalry, what ends up shaking out there. But so far so good. I think everybody's been pretty pleased with it.
So do you have if you had a hotline directly to Commissioner Yormark and he's asking your opinion, do you have a pecking order of who you would go after first in expansion?
Yeah, so we kind of did something. I think it just got uploaded to the site where we kind of lay out our takes. I think right now, I know that Utah's AD had that tweet like a couple of weeks ago that was like something disparaging about the Big 12, and I think he's kind of got to say that right now just because he is a Pac-12 AD. But I think I like the idea of Utah the most out of those four corner schools in particular, just because one, they've got the best football program, they got the most stable football program, mm-hmm. and then two, you kind of get that holy war rivalry with BYU. With Oklahoma leaving, you lose that Oklahoma-Texas rivalry, you lose the Bedlam rivalry with Oklahoma State. With Texas leaving, all those Texas schools hate Texas, so you're missing a lot of rivalries there. So I think pulling Utah in would be nice. I think just generally, I still care about geography. So I know that's kind of gone out the window as of late, even going back to adding West Virginia to the conference. But so I think Colorado, whenever I was growing up, Colorado was in the Big 12. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And then obviously the Arizona schools have a lot to offer as well. As far as, Gonzaga and the UConn stuff, I like that idea. I'm a big basketball guy, so I love that for basketball. I just don't want the Big 12's eyes to get bigger than its stomach and it not make sense monetarily. So I hope that they're just cautious in that. I'd love for it to make sense, and if it does, that's great. But it does seem a little crazy to go after a school on the West Coast and a school on the East Coast, and we're all of a sudden just one big happy family now.
Yeah, if I never have to interact with UConn fans again, I'll be a happy man. So I'm really pulling in the opposite direction of that one. But I don't know. We'll see how that goes here. So my next couple of questions here, I want to think of Oklahoma State as a whole, right? So I mean, of course, Oklahoma has to be a giant rivalry. I'm sure people get up and get excited for that. But outside of let's think like new Big 12 here, not excluding the two outgoing. Give us the favorite school to go up against in any sport, or who do Cowboys fans really get up and get excited for when they're coming to town or a big game's coming up?
Yeah, I think to start Kansas basketball, that's always a big deal just because of KU's pedigree in basketball, but that'll be the same for every conference. I think because that's kind of been the discussion of who Oklahoma State's rival is going to be now that OU's out of the league, and it doesn't look like they're going to play in football for a while. And I think it's going to naturally kind of shift to Texas Tech. We share a lot of similarities with Texas Tech, Stillwater and Lubbock, in that both rural country type folk, both use the same hand sign. That's always a big deal. Who copied who? I think there was some big study done on that. So I think that will kind of naturally be the next rivalry. And then maybe like a school. I think a lot of Oklahoma State fans respect Kansas State, and I think it's like a friendly rivalry. But I think in some similar ways to Tech, there's a lot of similarities in types of people in Kansas State. I think if there was like a spectrum, it'd be Tech fans on the crazy, Kansas State fans on the realistic and easy to get along with, and then Oklahoma State somewhere in the middle there. So I think that's who Oklahoma State will kind of lean towards rivalry wise. And then maybe even in football, Dana Holgerson is obviously the coach at Houston. He was the offensive coordinator under Mike Gundy for a long time. So I imagine those will just be like fun times. There'll be a lot of stories that come from those games.
Very nice, very nice. So same question, but broader and outside of the Big 12.
Who Oklahoma State will get up
or
with?
In the past, is there any teams that's came in and it just seemed like a little bit bigger than a normal game.
Well, it'll definitely be Oklahoma anytime those teams meet. It's still up in the air because just the way that Oklahoma left, kind of in the dead of night, there's been a lot of animosity. They're not sure what sports they're going to play in, if they're going to play in any sports. So anytime that gets matched up in any postseason tournament or preseason tournament or anything like that, those games are going to be ginormous, just because of the rarity of them now. And then trying to think outside, there's Arkansas is just kind of a close.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 3 hours east of Stillwater. So those are always pretty big games. LSU gets a little bit with, like Les Miles. He coached it in Stillwater before jumping over to LSU. So things like that. But I think with a lot of those big schools that, any fan base is going to get up and try and beat them. You think like Kentucky basketball, haven't played in a really long time, but there's just always an animosity between Kentucky. Whenever Oklahoma State got Cade Cunningham, Kentucky was very sure that it was getting Cade Cunningham. Cade even said in his thing that he was like this close to picking another school, and that was alluded to be Kentucky. So anytime that Kentucky gets brought up, they had some history. It's Eddie Sutton, longtime Oklahoma State basketball coach, Hall of Famer. He was denied the Hall of Fame for a really long time, and people were saying that, and this is all speculatory because the Hall of Fame board is anonymous, but people are saying that it's a Kentucky tie that is keeping him out. He finally did get in, but Oklahoma State fans just kind of naturally hate Kentucky for that reason. So I think there's like a little bit of that, but not too much outside of the Big 12 that I think they're just getting their pitchforks ready for.
So can you give us your favorite or a fan favorite Oklahoma State tradition for whether it be on a game day or just something that you see a lot of or people look forward to whenever a sports season starts?
Yeah, so much of it kind of centers around football, big football state, as I'm sure you know, being from Ohio. But starting with the day, there's the walk. They walk from the football team stays in the Atherton, which is a on-campus hotel. They walk from the Atherton to the stadium. A bunch of fans, they like paint the street and stuff like that. So that's kind of where it starts. That's always a fun tradition. As far as the in-stadium tradition, there's 3 fight songs. Oklahoma State has 3 fight songs. Too many, honestly.
Okay.
But right whenever they score, it's the waving song, and it's like waving wheat. Everybody's throwing their hands over their heads. Pistol Pete does a lot of crazy things. Whenever Oklahoma State scores, Bullet, he's a live horse, runs out on the field. Okay. That's always fun for, if an opposing kickoff returner is kind of like early into the end zone, like the refs are running him off the field because he's unaware that, a live horse is about to run out there. So there's things like that. It's Oklahoma State game days are a lot of fun in Stillwater. It's really a kind of a full day affair.
Perfect. So I kind of want to go through the sports as we'll experience them, right, as Bearcats fans for the first time in the Big 12. So Boone Pickens Stadium, give us a little summarized history lesson on the stadium and what that atmosphere is like on game day.
Yeah, so I don't know the exact year that it was open, but I believe it's like one of the longest standing stadiums in college football. It was called Lewis Field whenever I was young. T. Boone Pickens gives this $100+ million donation to have them renovated. It was a big deal back in the day. It's still a really nice stadium. Holds, they keep fluctuating. They've done some construction on it this year. Holds around 55,000. I believe at one point it was up to like 63, but they're giving more space and giving more luxury boxes and things like that. So I believe right now it's 55. In the east end zone is Gallagher-Iba Arena. It's like that is the east end zone. It's where the basketball team plays, where the wrestling team wrestles and stuff like that. I've been to all of the old Big 12 stadiums aside from West Virginia. And it's right up there. Boone Pickens Stadium is in terms of just niceness. It's really compact. Some opposing teams like to complain that the sidelines are too narrow, that they're running into these padded walls and things like that. They have the paddle people, who's a group of students. They have these big long paddles and they're smacking them on the wall leading up to the snap. So it's a pretty fierce environment, especially night games, big time games like that. It's a lot of fun to watch an Oklahoma State game in. And yeah, I think I really love Baylor Stadium, McLean Stadium. It's pretty new. But aside from that, I think Oklahoma State Stadium is right there with the best in the Big 12.
So you were talking about it being sort of an all-day affair. I'm assuming there's tailgates galore. So can you give us the tailgate scene? I know, like UC, for example, they've in the past like 10 years or so, they made a conscious effort to move the tailgating onto campus. I've been to U of Michigan where they're tailgating on a golf course. Some other, I mean, there's plenty of unique atmospheres around the country. So what is it like in Stillwater?
Yeah, the tailgate is the entire campus, really. There's tents, there's awnings. It's all over campus. You got people with like TVs and things like that. It's really robust. I think there's like college tailgating, and then there's like pro tailgating where you're like actually in a parking lot. It's not in a parking lot. Like you're on the lawns of the campus buildings and things like that, and you're out and about. So I again think it's one of the better Big 12 tailgating scenes. I think Iowa State has a really good tailgating scene. Kansas State is more of that kind of pro tailgating scene where they're kind of in the parking lot and things like that. I think Tech has been pretty good. But yeah, I think kind of along the lines with the stadium, it's really added the atmosphere, and that's kind of grown over the years, over Mike Gundy's tenure, as there's almost more people that are outside of the stadium whenever the game's being played than are inside the stadium, just because the tailgating scene has been so robust.
So is there I mean, of course, I mean, people know that like Cincinnati, the Skyline chili, people, whether, hate it, love it, that's sort of our hallmark food, whether it be for tailgates or just, whatever. You got like a go-to food or dish that's you're going to find at the different tailgate spots, or is it sort of free for all?
I'm going to lean towards free for all. Most of the time I'm in the stadium about 3 hours before kickoff because I'm, working the game. Yeah. But you're going to find a lot of barbecue, a lot of chicken. It's going to be things along those lines. And then Eskimo Joe's, which I mentioned earlier, it's like right off campus. And the really big food there is the cheese fries. So, but yeah, I think it's pretty varied in what you're going to get, kind of tailgate to tailgate.
So more of a specific couple of questions here for football this upcoming season. Can you explain Mike Gundy to us?
Oh,
he's an interesting character.
Yeah, let's see. He's a man with a mullet. I think that's where most people start. A lot of people are going to know him from the I'm 40 thing. That was a really long time ago at this point. He's almost inexplainable. He's a unique dude. He's an enigma. He knows what he's talking about. Sometimes he'll pull some random thing out and he'll be like, I think this is going to happen in the next however many years based on, what's going on. And he's usually kind of right about it just because he's been in this game for so long that he kind of can see things happening before they do. So he's a unique dude. He loves Stillwater. He's, Oklahoma State through and through, obviously went to school here. But I think to explain him, you just kind of need to say that he's inexplainable at certain times.
I'll take it. That's kind of what I figured you were going to go for there. Very interesting character. So this next question here, I think because Texas and Oklahoma are leaving, I'm sure I've talked to some other fan bases and they're not thrilled with the 4 new incoming schools, us, BYU, Houston, and Central Florida. I've heard the Big 12 is now the leftovers, of course, the truck stop conference and all kind of other hate that they'll throw our way, but that's, let them do that. But one thing I do hear often enough is that Oklahoma State is kind of like the name or the brand of the Big 12 now. What do you think about that proclamation?
I think they certainly had a chance to kind of stamp that. I think this past football season, going 7-6, and kind of failing to capitalize on the Fiesta Bowl winning season before, hurt that a little bit. But I think I struggle because I've thought about this too, like who's kind of the flag bearer now. And my first thought is Oklahoma State, but I'm just so involved with Oklahoma State that it's easy for my view to kind of be skewed. But you look at, Baylor has a lot of good athletic programs. Basketball just won a national championship not too long ago. Obviously, Kansas basketball is going to be Kansas basketball. K-State with Chris Kleiman looks to kind of be on the up and up. So I think that to an extent, and obviously TCU just made the national championship football game. So I think to an extent it's kind of strength in numbers right now. And we'll kind of wait and see which of these teams can kind of jump up and win 3 football conference titles in a row. Maybe that this kind of becomes the default flag bearer. But I've always thought that with those teams gone, Oklahoma State might be that team, could be that team. But I'm just so close to Oklahoma State that it's hard for me to really see past the big bright orange. So I think that's fair, but I can hear arguments for other programs as well.
You sort of like just briefly mentioned something there, and that kind of got me thinking. I've heard I listen to a lot of Big 12 radio on Sirius XM. It's something that they're talking about a lot is for the name, the flag bearer, as you put it, is it better for the conference to have it be TCU this year, Texas the next, Kansas State, Baylor? I feel as though it's better for the conference to have like a different name, a different team each year, but as a national conference, a national brand, not having that lone standout team like Oklahoma has been in the past, or how Alabama, Georgia is for the SEC. I think for reputation wise, that sort of will hurt the Big 12.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think that from a national perception, the Big 12's always kind of been a second class below the Big 10, below the SEC. But I think I think in a 4-team playoff that really does hurt a national perception. But expanding to 12, where the Big 12's likely to going to get its conference champion in every year, maybe that changes a little bit. But yeah, I think that having a big name kind of flag bearer, I think that's overall beneficial for the conference, just because the national pundits could look and say, oh yeah, well, the Big 12, they've got X team. So like Oregon's probably going to be the Pac-12's, assuming the Pac-12 is alive whenever we wake up tomorrow. Oregon's going to be the team moving forward with USC and UCLA gone. And the Big 12 doesn't necessarily have kind of that flag bearer right now. And I think that it would be beneficial if they did have one. I'm just not sure that there is one. I think, realistically, being strength in numbers, I think is a good thing. But the national perception, yeah, I think they kind of need a flag bearer.
So you brought up 7-6 last year for the Cowboys. What is the outlook for this year?
It's unknown, I think, is the best way to put it. A lot of transfers went out. A lot of transfers came in. They're going to have Alan Bowman, likely their starting quarterback. He played at Tech a few years, was really good, had some freak injuries like a punctured lung and like a broken collarbone and just really kind of freak injuries. Then he transferred to Michigan, was essentially the third string quarterback the past few years for Michigan. Then he transfers in to Stillwater. So if he can stay healthy, he's proven to be, really good in the Big 12. But if not, then you're kind of, wondering what's going to happen there. So I think it's a lot of mystery that they lost 20 something players in the portal last year, including obviously Spencer Sanders, starting quarterback. And then you're just bringing a lot of guys in. So it's kind of a reset. I will say, like, Mike Gundy hasn't missed a bowl game since his first year in Stillwater. So I think I keep seeing their over-under win total at 6.5. I'd likely just take the over just because that's just how Mike Gundy's done it his whole time. And then on top of that, I think they've got one of the easier schedules in the Big 12 this year, just the way it kind of broke out. They get all 4 of the new teams, and no disrespect, but it's like, are these teams going to be able to play, power conference football for an entire year? So I think it's going to break out well. I'd guess, 7, 8, 9 wins, somewhere in there. And then you kind of see where it breaks.
Very nice. Let's move on here. Let's talk a little basketball. I know the Big 12, especially this year, is a gauntlet in the basketball world. But when I was doing, I did a little bit of research here because I wasn't super familiar with like the facilities of Oklahoma State. But for your arena, something that caught my eye right away is it not only has 1 but 2 nicknames. I don't know if this is like common knowledge, but I didn't know this before I looked it up. The first nickname is the rowdiest arena in the country. That's high praise. And then the Madison Square Garden of the Plains.
Okay, I've not heard the Madison Square Garden of the Plains, but yeah, bringing the rowdy is that's kind of they're saying it holds 13,611, and when it is full, it is an atmosphere like no other. I remember the Trae Young Oklahoma game. Oklahoma State won it, I believe, in overtime, and it was the most bonkers arena that I've ever been in my life. Court stormings, there's a lot of high level basketball players that talk about it, and they say like you can feel the floor shaking, like whenever you're the visiting team, and in the locker room, like it feels like the whole arena is already shaking. So it hasn't always been like that. As of lately, they've averaged somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 fans in there, just because the basketball program has been down. But whenever it's going, Gallagher Iba Arena is like no place ever. It's a unique setup in that it's kind of a 2-tiered system. They used to just hold somewhere around 6,000, and then they did the Raise the Roof project and added the 300 levels. Some people say that they liked it better with it, the roof lowered, just because of the atmosphere it created. But yeah, whenever it's going, it's an arena unlike any other. But here as of late, it hasn't been jumping quite as much.
All right, so I like when I was at UC, we were still in the Big East, right? So we, it was Syracuse, UConn, Marquette, we like it was just Louisville. It was just one like you never have a night off in basketball, especially. I think that this version of the Big 12 this past year would have exceeded that, and I think next year it's going to be even tougher. And I think it's definitely on pace to be the best basketball conference in the country again, and I don't think it'll be close. So what is it like in the Big 12 version of never not having a night off?
Yeah, and Mike Boynton, Oklahoma State's coach, he kind of alluded to that. It was like midway through the Big 12 season. He was essentially saying, hey, all 10 of these teams, to the 10-team conference, all 10 of these teams deserve to be in the NCAA tournament, and they should be in the NCAA tournament. Like he was kind of trying to curve the enthusiasm of saying, like, I don't know why all 10 of these teams can't get in if they're all worthy. So yeah, it's nuts. You can go from, playing in Fog Allen at Kansas one night to hosting Baylor, 2-3 nights later. And those are, 2 teams that have won national championships in the past 5 years. And then obviously adding Houston, who's been, consistently a top 10 team over the last, 10 or so years. Even Kansas State's been really good. They had that big run this past year. Tech has been really good. Their facilities have gone crazy in Lubbock. They have a new basketball practice facility that's unlike any other that Mike Boynton's, I think, trying to replicate a little bit here in Stillwater. So yeah, it's a gauntlet. It's crazy. A lot of the players here, they talk about, staying level-headed. You can't get high, can't get too high, can't get too low, and that's kind of coaches speak to an extent. But it's really true, because if you start feeling bad about yourself after one loss, then you're just going to have a, murderer's row of the next 5 games that they're not going to feel sorry for you at all. There are teams that, one of Mike Boynton's teams, I believe, started conference play like 0-7. And he was like, hey, none of these teams feel sorry for us. Like, none of these teams are just going to come out and be like, oh, that's okay. Like, we'll play to your level for this game, because it's just a murderer's row. I think that's the best way to describe it.
So I know, let me ask you like this. If you had to pick a third sport across everything that Oklahoma State has to offer, what do people get up for the most? I mean, I know softball's popular. I know baseball as well. Is it one of those two? Is it volleyball? Is it golf? What's the third sport people get up for Oklahoma State?
Yeah, so Oklahoma State's very kind of family oriented, and it's been, this sports year has been like a historically bad sports year for Oklahoma State in general. But I'd say somewhere on that, third tier, you've got softball. The Cowgirls have been to 4 straight Women's College World Series. Baseball, they just built a new ridiculously beautiful stadium called O'Brate Stadium. It's got to be one of the best in the country. One that wrestling is huge in Stillwater. The Oklahoma State wrestling team, I believe, has won 34 national championships. It's the most of any team in any sport. That's a big deal. The men's golf team has, historic pedigree. You look at Victor Hovland, who just won this past weekend. He's an Oklahoma State alum. So I'd say somewhere along those, you'd probably lean more at this point, wrestling or softball, as far as the kind of that third tier. Both of those programs are huge. Wrestling has been down in recent years, but down equals top 8 in the country. They had a streak of, I believe it was like 13 Big 12 titles in a row in wrestling, and they've kind of added, like North Dakota State wrestles in the Big 12, and they've added a bunch of affiliate programs. So wrestling's a huge deal here. And then the way that Kenny Gajewski's got the softball program rolling, those are hot tickets.
Very nice. So if you do you guys have bull riding?
I believe there's a rodeo team. It's not like it's not NCAA sanctioned. There's an equestrian team. They're NCEA, I believe it's what it's called. But they've recently won a national championship. Equestrian's one of like the actual, not a club program, but like an actually, school sanctioned program. So that's I don't know if it's a big deal, but not a ton of programs or not a ton of universities have equestrian programs, and Oklahoma State's got one.
All right. So this final question here I have for you. This is more of a betting type of question here. I'm going to propose a situation here for you, and you tell me which one you like best. All right. So talking about betting. So this question it's brought to you by our other new sponsor, the BetStamp app, which not only allows you to line shop so you can find the best odds across all sports books, it also tracks all of your bets in one location across all sports books as well. So this is great for those of you who are like me, who are using multiple sports books. No need to flip between apps. It's all there in the BetStamp app. If you download it, be sure to use the referral code GoBeercats. All right, Marshall. If I gave you this upcoming season, if I gave you Texas and TCU or the field, who are you picking to win the Big 12 in football?
Ooh, let's see. I think TCU is going to be very good. Texas has been a hollow giant for a really long time. So I'm not sure that I'm buying the Texas hype. I'll believe it's at the point to where I will believe the Texas hype when I see it. I almost want Texas to be good at this point. It's almost getting sad how mediocre that they've been over the past 10 years. But I do think TCU is going to be very good. You think about K-State maybe could be decent.
They won it this past year, right? Don't people forget that. So
I think I'd take Texas and TCU though, just because I do feel highly about TCU, and then Texas always has the potential. They often win the offseason. They've just got to turn that into actually winning the season. So TCU or Texas can win it whenever. Maybe it'll be this year, maybe not, but I think TCU is a pretty good shout.
Awesome. Very nice. Marshall, I certainly appreciate you coming on, giving us a crash course in Oklahoma State traditions and what to expect this upcoming season. Do you any questions for me or any burning questions about the Bearcats before we get off here? I think he froze.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
You're back. I can hear
sweet.
you. Yes. Yeah. There you go.
Okay. What was the question?
Any burning questions about the Bearcats that I can answer for you before we get off here?
Is Cincinnati at all worried what post Luke Fickell life looks like? Because I think kind of from the outside, It's like, okay, did Luke Fickell build that program, or is this just an actually good program?
I think when you get a coach like Luke Fickell's not the first coach to have success here in modern times, right? We had Mark Antonio, we had Brian Kelly, Butch Jones to an extent, although I was never a big fan of him. And then, Fickell took over for Tuberville, who was just here on vacation, right? So if you spend more time on the field than on the golf course, there's potential to be successful here. And Luke Fickell was like maybe the pinnacle of what that could be. I mean, going to the college football playoff as a G5 school is definitely something great that I'm glad I got to live through. So with a little bit of effort, I think we can get back there. I think most Bearcats fans' expectations, or what we would like to see this year, is bowl eligibility. I don't think there might be some on the fray that are like, yeah, we're coming in day one running this place. But I would say most level-headed, non-drunk fans are hoping to be 500 this year.
And then who do you think the natural rival becomes? Is it West Virginia just because that's the closest proximity-wise, or is it Iowa State, I guess, is somewhat up there?
We hate Central Florida. Like,
okay.
If for 2 seconds online on Twitter, pose a question, and in the comments below, you will see Bearcats and Hilton Knight manager arguing over something. That's what we like to call them. So we're kind of bringing that in. I think that'll be a nice, the rivalry will be a nice addition to the Big 12 that maybe some people aren't expecting. Other than that, I think getting to know West Virginia again will be a nice reacquaintance to a rivalry. But like you mentioned, I'm super excited to go up against Iowa State for my own personal reasons. I won't get into those now. Those are well documented on the podcast. But yeah, I mean, those three, just proximity, I think, has a lot to do with it. And I'd love to get a nice rivalry going with Iowa State in some way, shape, or form.
And then last thing, what else is, what's kind of Cincinnati's second sport? If it's football, then I'm not very familiar with what else goes on in Cincinnati.
Well, historically, we're a basketball school. Historically, and then since 2005, 2006, people started filling up Nippert Stadium and started paying attention to football much more. So basketball, now football is kind of 1A, 1B. Our next tier, our men's golf team was really good this year. I followed them more than I'd done at all in the previous years. Volleyball has had their time as well. We've had a couple former players win gold medals with the U.S. Olympics team. Baseball's trying. When the Reds are terrible, people will go out to baseball games, and even them, they've been packing the stadium more often than not in the past couple of years with the Reds being down. But if you're talking about championships, it's our dance team. Which sounds unique, but I'll throw out like 14, 15 national championships in the past like 20, 25 years. So if you're talking rings, that's the go-to, the UC dance team, which is famous in their own right around here.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. It's unique in that, we're kind of losing Austin. We're losing Norman, which is essentially Oklahoma City. So there's not a ton of cities left. It's a bunch of college towns. So Cincinnati will definitely be unique in that aspect.
Definitely. Marshall, I certainly appreciate you coming on. I will definitely reach out to you again. I like to do previews the week before, and I know UC and OSU, which is now officially the OSU that we can refer to, not that team to the north of us now. I'm excited about that. So I'll definitely reach out once we get a little closer to that game, and we'll see if we can't get an in-season preview about what's happening between our two teams.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
See you, Marshall.
See you.